All right, welcome to Frank Teaches DevOps. Yes, Happy New Year to my lovely viewers. In this video episode, we will be discussing about continuous deployment with Jenkins and Kubernetes, right? And when we say continuous deployment, let's take a look up of what continuous deployment is. Continuous deployment. Continuous deployment is when you continually, all right, deploy your application into production, right? So it's a strategy in software development where code changes to an application are released automatically into production environment. That's continuous deployment. So we want to implement continuous deployment using Jenkins and Kubernetes, all right? So let's get into my architecture. Here is my architecture. On this side, I have GitHub. Let's show us our GitHub. This is my GitHub repository, right? So here is the repository I will be using. So this is my application I will be deploying to my cluster. All right, let's go back. Now, here is my EC2 instance. Okay, this is the EC2 instance. On this EC2 instance, I need to set up Jenkins. All right, Jenkins is a major player in this instance. All right, it's a major player. All other packages are just supporting packages like the Docker. I need to set up Docker, AWS CLI, kubectl, and Git. These are all players. They are all secondary players in my EC2 instance. While Jenkins is a primary player, is a main focus. All right, is a main focus. Now, on my right hand side, I have my Kubernetes cluster. Okay. Now, for deployment to occur, for deployment to happen, I need to integrate my cluster with my Jenkins server. My cluster with my Jenkins server so that I would be able to deploy, to automate my deployment from Jenkins to Kubernetes. So this is the whole picture. All right. So I need to integrate my cluster to my Jenkins server. Then from Jenkins server, I should be able to perform what we call continuous deployment. So anytime I need to deploy, because there's a connection already between Jenkins and the cluster, I can always deploy. All right. I can always deploy. Okay. So yeah, so this is how the structure is. I'm going to have a separate instance. On that instance, I'm going to install all of these components you're seeing here, and I will do all the settings. Then on the other side, I have my cluster already. My cluster is up and running. Let's check that. So here is my Kubernetes cluster with 2 worker nodes. This is my cluster, okay, with 2 worker nodes. These are the 2 worker nodes, okay. Now back to our structure. This is my cluster with 2 worker nodes. Let me use how do I set up something? uh Sorry, let me explain. Okay, great. Let me just use this as a worker node. So in here we have 2 worker nodes. I have 2 worker nodes in my cluster. Okay, now great. So let's get started. So let's get connected to my EC2 instance. copy. So this is my EC2 instance. It is very bare in nature, bare in the sense that it's empty. So I need to install Jenkins followed by the rest of these. Okay, but anyway, let's start with AWS CLI. However, I have AWS CLI, though it is just it is just version 1, and I won't be using version 1. I'll be using version 2. Okay, so now let's see how we can install AWS CLI. So I'll go on Google, AWS CLI install. So installing the latest version of AWS CLI, which is version 2. My OS is Linux. I'm using base 64. So copy this. So let's go there, paste that. Okay, so now I think I now have, let's check my version one more time. Okay, so I need to exit and come back. Now check the version one more time. Okay, all right, so let's completely go out. Let's come back in and now check the version again. Now we have AWS CLI version 2 with Python 3.9. Great. So from the diagram, we've installed AWS CLI. We also need to install kubectl. So let's go back to our Google and see how to install kubectl. Kubectl. Let's see this link. All right. So let's see. So I see my Kubernetes API version is 1.24. Let's confirm that. It's 1.24. So this is Kubernetes version is 1.24. So I have to install a kubectl of version 1.24. Okay, it has to match. So there are two versions here. One is for Intel, and the other is for um, ARM, which is the MacBook architecture, right? So I'm taking Intel, which is AMD. All right. So let's do that right way. Paste that. First step. Then step B says step B is optional. Let's go down. Step C, I have to make the script executable that I have done. Then step C says I need to create these home directories, environment variables. That's it. Then step 4 says we should test this. Let's test kubectl. kubectl is 1.24. So kubectl has been installed. Now let's check. We need to install Git as well. So let's go back there. So Git is just simple. So sudo yum install Git. All right. So after installing Git, I think we are almost there. So these are the prerequisites. The next thing is to install what? Docker. So let's see to install Docker. So do the same thing. Yum install Docker. So I have Docker 20.0 readily available. So it's getting installed. Okay, Docker has been installed, so I need to start Docker service and put it up. So sudo systemctl enable docker.service is being enabled. Then I also need to start the service for Docker. So the service for Docker has also been started. So the next we are left with is what? Is Jenkins. And to install Jenkins, we may need to visit the Jenkins website, official documentation, which is on jenkins.io. So the official website for Jenkins is jenkins.io. So click on download, and I'll go to my Linux flavor is Red Hat flavor, which is Amazon Linux, which is this. Take that. So copy this first line, copy, move over here, paste it. You're there. Copy the second guy, come over here, paste it. Now we need to install Java. Copy, move over here. Let's go. What's it saying? What did it say? Okay, I need to do sudo. I need to do sudo dash y. Let's bring it here. Okay, so because that won't install Java 11, so we need to install Java 11 this way. Okay, then the last but not the least is installing Jenkins. So copy that, copy it. All right, now let's install Jenkins. Sorry, sudo that's yep, and voila, Jenkins is getting installed. So the same way we started and enabled the service for Docker, we need to also enable Jenkins service. So let's enable Jenkins. Jenkins dot service is there. Then let's also restart the service for Jenkins. Restart. Take some time. Okay, while we are waiting, okay, it's already there. That's finished starting. So let's check what we've done so far. On my EC2 instance, I've installed Docker, I've installed Jenkins, I've installed AWS CLI, I've installed kubectl, I've also installed Git. So I have done everything. So let's look at the notes, the note part. Now, add the note says add Jenkins as a user to Docker group. Okay, because in my deployment, I'll be using Docker a lot. Docker in the sense that I will be Dockerizing my application and pushing it to Docker Hub. So for that, Jenkins will be using Docker clients, and the only way Jenkins can use Docker without errors, all right, without errors, is by adding Jenkins as a user to the Docker group. Okay, yes, because if I don't do it, if we don't do it, Jenkins can never use Docker clients. Can never use Docker. All right, can never use Docker. You always have the issue of permission denied. So for that, we need to add um, Jenkins as a user to Docker group. So how do we do that? So we'll say user mode dash a dash g Docker and Jenkins. So but before then, let's check the group etc group and see where Docker is. This is where Docker is. So I need to add Jenkins as a member of that group. So say user mode dash a dash capital G followed by Docker, then followed by Jenkins. So Jenkins has been added as a user to this group. That's note number one. Then note number two says add Jenkins user to the sudoers file. Now to add Jenkins, we'll go open the etc sudoers file. All right. Now we have to scroll to the bottom and look for the section that says the sudo permission that says no password. All right, because we don't want Jenkins user to we don't want Jenkins user to be prompted for password. All right, so I'll copy this line and I will paste it, and I'm going to clean all of this and type Jenkins. So we don't want Jenkins user to be prompted for password. I think like this is perfectly okay. Escape, save, and quit. So this was note number 2. Then note number 3 says authenticate with Jenkins user blah 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 blah. Okay, and install Docker plugin. Okay, now let's now try to access our Jenkins dashboard. So far, we've done note number 1 and note number 2. Okay, so now let's do other things. Okay, let me exit. Okay, so now we need to get our cluster. So far, we don't cluster dash info, nothing yet. Okay, it will drop error. All right. So first and foremost, we need to authenticate. This user, EC2 user, has to authenticate to AWS. So these are my access key and secret key. AWS configure, give my access key, copy your secrets, and also give the secrets. My region is EU West 2 region. Then format is JSON. Okay, so let's confirm. AWS STS gets caller identity. So you can see I'm now authenticated to my AWS tenant. So next I need to do is to download the kubeconfig file to my server, right? Great. So what do? We go and look for that command as well. So Google kube updates. It's called kube updates. So let's check what we have. So this is it. So copy it. Sorry. The name of my cluster is EKS cluster. Then the region is EU West 2. I think that's all. That's all I need. So remove this semicolon. Bam. So once I run this command, you see it tell me that a new context for this has been added. All right. So now I now have the content of my kubeconfig in my based machine. I check the content. So this is what I have. All right. Great. So now I can run kubectl cluster dash info. So I will get the Kubernetes cluster info. I can also check the number of nodes I have. kubectl gets nodes. I already have 2 running worker nodes as we have it in our diagram here. So here's my cluster and I have my 2 worker nodes. Okay, great. Now as this, because all throughout of this deployment, I will be using the Jenkins user. All right, this EC2 user does not have the proper rights to run Jenkins command because it is Jenkins. Okay, so now let's see how we can switch over to the Jenkins user. Asking for password sudo su dash Jenkins. It's not going, all right, because it's like the Jenkins user is not allowed to log into a shell. All right, it's not allowed. So let's check if that is correct. So I'll check the etc pass wd file. So let's look for the Jenkins user. You can see Jenkins user here. The description is Jenkins automation server, and this user is not required, is not allowed to log in, to have a shell, a login shell, right? So that's why I say you have been false. So every other user that has permission for shell, theirs is being bash. This cannot log in, no login, no login means you can't log in. So root can log in. You're seeing being bash. So I have to change this from false to bash. So let's go into that file, etc pass wd, and go to the bottom, and at the end, come. I'll change this to bash. Escape and save and quit. Save and quit. Escape, save Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, all right. So let's come in with sudo. Great. Oh, oh, sorry. This thing has rebooted. Okay. Bash. All right. We are fine. Escape, save, and quit. Perfect. So now at this juncture, we should be able to log in to the Jenkins home. All right. Sudo su dash Jenkins. Now Jenkins should be able now. Now this is Jenkins home. However, Jenkins is not having its proper, the home directory for Jenkins is not coming properly the way it should come. The way we have it as this EC2 user, okay, is because there are some files, there are some environment files missing in Jenkins home. Okay, so let me exit from here, right? So that there are some environment files missing from Jenkins home, and those files are in etc scale. All right, etc scale. So let's check out those files. So every user, every legitimate user must have these files in its home directory. Then the user should be able to have its home directory properly um, formatted, right? Properly formatted. As you see, Jenkins home directory is not properly formatted. So if I switch again to Jenkins user, we still have this guy because these files are not there. All right. Let me exit. So if I also check for if I also check ls-la home ec2 ec2 user has those files. These are the files on ec2 home, right? That's why you're seeing the ec2 user has a proper home directory formatted. Okay, so for that, we may need to copy these files, their these files into the Jenkins home directory. And the Jenkins home directory is on var lib Jenkins. All right, var lib Jenkins. So this is what we'll do. So we'll copy everything that starts with star, everything that starts with star. Okay. Um, sorry. Dot asterisk. All right, into slash var lib then Jenkins. All right, so copy everything into Jenkins home. So I now have those files in Jenkins home. So if I now do sudo su dash Jenkins, we should be able to have a proper formatted home. Jenkins should be able to have a proper formatted home from what we had earlier, like this. All right. So if I now check in Jenkins, I should be able to see those hidden files. So these are the hidden files. All right. So great. So now Jenkins on its own needs to authenticate with AWS. All right. Jenkins on its own needs to authenticate to AWS, because if Jenkins does not authenticate to AWS, Jenkins will not be able to deploy to EKS, to Amazon EKS. So for Jenkins to be able to deploy to Amazon EKS, Jenkins as a user must authenticate with AWS. So how is Jenkins going to do that? So that is item number 3. Authenticate with the Jenkins user to AWS using AWS config. So I want to copy my access key one more time. Come over here. AWS configure. All right. I'll paste that. I'll copy my secret key. Enter. I'll do the same thing. And EU West 2. Then JSON. Great. So if I do AWS STS get caller identity, yes. So Jenkins has now authenticated towards AWS. So it means Jenkins will be able, Jenkins will be able to deploy applications towards the cluster, right? So now the third phase is install Docker plugins. So now, which is the fourth phase, sorry, install Docker plugins. So let's see how we can access our Jenkins U dashboard. So come over here, copy the public IP to the EC2 instance, and come to your browser. Jenkins runs on port 8080. So here is the initial setup of Jenkins. So copy the password. That's where the password is. So I'm going to cut that. All right. So copy that, copy it, come over here, give the password, and continue. Okay. Yeah, it will ask for initial plugin installation. So that's we are okay with that. So let's go ahead. So this takes some time. So let me just pause the video, and once it finishes installing, I'll be right back. Okay, let's set up username is admin, password is 1234. Keep it simple. 1234. Full name is admin. Email is admin. So save and continue. Yes, everything looks fine. Close, and save and finish. All right, start using Jenkins. So start using Jenkins. All right. So let's go back to our dashboard. So our dashboard says item number 4, install Docker plugins and Kubernetes plugins. So to do all of that, so I'll go to manage Jenkins, and I'll go to manage plugins, and I'll go to available plugins, and I'll search for Docker. Right. So I love picking almost everything. Docker pipeline. That's it. So install without restarts. So this should install everything without restarting Jenkins. Perfect. So the next set of plugins I need to install is Kubernetes. All right, Kubernetes. Pick the first one, pick the second one, and CLI. All right, install without restart. Okay, so let's go back to our whiteboard. So install Docker plugins, install Kubernetes plugins. Then last but not the least is create Docker Hub credentials on Jenkins. All right. Okay. Before we do that, let's look at integrate Kubernetes with Docker. Sorry, no, with Jenkins. Now this is the part. With Jenkins. All right. So here's the part. So let's look at if our plugin is finished. It's finished. Great. So now let's go back to manage Jenkins. Now to do this level of integration, all right, I'll click on what, which is let's go back, which is um the last, second to the last, integrate Kubernetes with Jenkins. All right. So now this is what we want to do now. This is the part. All right. We want to perfect, want to get this integration. So we'll go back to Jenkins, click on manage Jenkins. On manage Jenkins, click on manage nodes and clouds. So click on manage nodes and clouds and click on configure clouds. So on this new cloud, on this button drop down, you see Kubernetes. So click on Kubernetes. This page opens. Click on Kubernetes cloud details. All right. So ordinarily, we can search for the Kubernetes URL. So the Kubernetes URL will be your cluster. Okay. kubectl. Okay. Jenkins cannot run this. Let's go back to EC2 user. kubectl um, um, config view config or thereabout. So config view, we can see the server. Where is the server? So here is the URL to my Kubernetes cluster. Okay, but I won't be using this. I will be using the URL. I won't also be using the server certificate. Rather, I'll be making use of the Kubernetes kubeconfig. All right, the kubeconfig file. All right, so for that, I'm going to be adding a credential. I'll be adding credential. So since I will be needing this file at kubeconf, I need the content of this file. All right, so what I will do, I'll copy everything in this file. Copy it, copy. I'll save it on my base machine. On my base machine, that will be somewhere around Okay, let me call it cube conf. All right, vm cube conf. So inside of this file, I'm going to paste everything. All right, escape, save, and quit. Perfect. Now let's come and create credential. Come back to Jenkins to create credential. So click on what? Add credential, Jenkins. The kind is a secret file. Now choose the file. Click on here to choose that file. The file is kubeconf and click on what? Open. The ID, you can give it K8 cred. Description, you can say credential K8 K8 credential. Right? Click on what? Add. It's been added. So let's choose that credential. Kubeconf. It's been chosen. So now let's test if actually our connection is up and running. Let's check. So if everything goes fine, we should have a response saying that connected to what? Kubernetes. So far, we have now seen how we could integrate our Jenkins and Kubernetes cluster. So as it is now, my Jenkins is now connected, or my Kubernetes cluster is now connected to my Jenkins server. So everything is fine. All you need to do is just to click on apply and click save. We are all set. Go back to our whiteboard. Now the last thing is create Docker Hub credentials. So I have Docker Hub credentials, so I have to create Docker Hub credentials. Go back to um, manage Jenkins, and click on what? Manage credentials. Okay, click on system, global credentials, and add credential. So this credential we are adding, the kind is username and password, and the username is Frank is infotech. So that's my username to Docker Hub. My password is something there. Okay, so the ID, I have used a variable called Docker Hub in my Jenkins file. I'm going to show us. Let me finish with this credential creation. Okay, Docker Hub credentials. All right. So click on what? Remember, my ID is Docker-Hub. Click on what? Create. So I'll be using this ID in my pipeline, Jenkins file. Now, if I go to my, I'm through. Okay, before I go there, let me just show us. We're now through with everything with on the notes list, right? Create Docker Hub credentials on Jenkins, which I have done. So the next thing is our deployment. Let's go on GitHub and see all we need to do. So I'll go to my GitHub. So here's my GitHub. So in this GitHub, I have three major files. One is a Docker file. So this Docker file is just, I'm just keeping it simple. It's just to Dockerize CentOS application. All right. On this application, I'm installing Apache web server, and I'm also keeping the container alive. All right. So just simple. All right. Go back to the roots. Now on the Jenkins file, so here's my Jenkins file. Okay. So these are just formalities. This environment variable is just to use it to um, arrange my image. All right, my image properly, just for proper labeling. Okay, service name is the name of my repository or something else. Organization name is this name of my GitHub. Docker Hub username, this is my Docker Hub username. Repository tag, this is how I want to tag my image. All right, great. So the first stage, definitely it will do it will go through a GitHub checkout stage. After that, it will now do a Docker build. Before the Docker build, this function here is using that Docker Hub credential we created. Docker-Hub. Do you see this credential? So using that credential, it will log in, it will authenticate with Docker Hub, which is my own account. All right. After authenticating, the next phase is to do a Docker build, right, with the Docker file in that repository. Okay, let me duplicate this guy. I have a Docker file, which I showed us already. I have a Docker file here. So here's a Docker file. So it's going to be building that Docker file. Then next, after building, it will do a push. Okay, after push, then in this phase, I need to install kubectl on my worker nodes, right? Install kubectl. After installing kubectl, the next phase is to deploy to the cluster. So this is where what's happening here. At this phase, I am actually downloading my kubeconfig, all right, to the necessary worker nodes. After downloading the kubeconfig, then using kubectl, deploying my application. So my application is on deployed on YAML. This is my Kubernetes YAML manifest. All right. So this guy has it has a deployment which is the CentOS. Okay. So here is where I'm using that tag. All right. I'm using that tag which I need to show us somewhere. Okay. So this is the tag. This tag has the image. Okay. And I'm doing something called a technique called environment substitution. Ordinarily, you cannot use this in a Kubernetes manifest YAML file. It will throw up error. Kubernetes will throw up error. For you to overcome this, you have to use a concept called environment substitution. So with environment substitution, I should be able to substitute this tag, this variable, inside of my manifest file. And this is just the service. All right. All right. So we're going to see all of these in action. Okay. Now this is it. And that's all. That is all. Okay. Now go back to the root of my repository and let's start. Go back to Jenkins. Go back to dashboard. Click on new item. App demo. Okay. And the kind of pipeline is, let me go with a multi-branch pipeline. Multi-branch pipeline is a pipeline where I get to build multiple branches. All right, then I click OK. Okay, so now let's just do some settings. Branch sources is from Git. Okay, now your Git repository URL. So I'll go to GitHub and copy this guy. Come here, copy HTTPS, come over here, paste that, and that's fine. I don't have any credential. And behavior, yes, discover the branches for me. Then add my strategy. I need to build multiple branches, right? So first branch in that repository is main. Keep it there. And I think that's all. That's all I need to do. Then by default, I have my Jenkins file in my root directory, which is this. Okay, which is there. So that's it guys. So click on apply and click on save. So that being said, we should be fine. So I'm going to scan. It's now scanning for me automatically. All right, so click on this. Let's see what's there. Let's see what happens. It's trying to build. Okay, so open this guy, check console. Let's see. It failed. Why is it failing? Oh, all right. It's saying permission denied. Permission denied when trying to use Docker. Permission denied. Remember, remember, we did assign Jenkins user as a member to Docker group. However, Jenkins or Docker. However, now Jenkins is a member of the group Docker. However, Docker is not picking up Jenkins. So for that to fly, I may need to reboot this instance. All right, this EC2 instance. So for that to work, all right, we may need to reboot this Jenkins instance. All right, so this is what I will do. I'll go back and say sudo reboot -f, forcefully reboot the instance. Because it takes time to come up, I will be pausing the video, and once it's up, we'll be right back. All right, let's try and log in and see if everything is back. Okay, great, everything is back. All right, so now if we try to build this pipeline again, it should work. So let's go. Now we are back, and let's go back to main. And but before we build, okay, admin, let's log into Jenkins server. Before we build again, let's look at what we have on the cluster. So kubectl gets pod. Um, everything is empty. kubectl gets service is still empty. We only have the original service, which is the Kubernetes service. kubectl gets all um, dash dash in all namespaces. All right, so nothing is there for us. Nothing is there. All right, so now let's get started. So let's rebuild and see what happens. So if I click on build one more time, oh sorry, console outputs, check the console outputs. Let's see. Login was successful. Can you see login succeeded? And that started building. Docker build that targets sending build context to Docker daemon. And yeah, let's see. Let's see if everything goes fine. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Completed. Let's see. That's pushed to Docker up. Docker push successfully targets. So let's see. Push first to blah 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 blah. Docker push this. So let's see if everything goes well. Okay. Okay, it downloaded kubectl, it installed kubectl, it's now applying kubectl. All right, so the build was successful. It was a success. Let's go back to main. Let's see. So we have everything is now green for us. So let's check our cluster and see. So kubectl gets pod. We should have, okay, this is just an error. It's a simple error from okay, kubectl get service. All right, this is the CentOS service. So if you can see from our deploy.yaml, so this is the service name of the service. The deployment name is CentOS deploy. So let's check for kubectl get deploy. Deployment is CentOS deploy. So I think this error is coming from somewhere. So let's describe kubectl describe pod and the pod name. Here's the pod name. Copy it. I think it's coming from my command statements. Back off restarting failed container. What is the problem? Okay, I know what the problem is. It's coming from the Docker file. I think I didn't do this thing properly. It's either I remove the double quotes. All right, so let me do it like this and commit changes, and let's build it one more time. So if I build this one more time, let's build one more time. Um, deploy the cluster. That's deployed the cluster. So let's check kubectl get pod. Voila, you can see our container is now up and running. The container is actively running. So I can now actually exec. So kubectl exec dash it into this container, exec into this container, copy, paste, dash dash bash. So I can comfortably exec into my running CentOS container. So guys, this is the whole thing. I installed in the process we installed what's it called? We installed Apache Web Server. So I can go to that site. Um I can check cd/var www HTML. So that's it. So I have it. So I have it. So this is the container guy exit. So this is how we implement continuous deployment. Continuous deployment is a software development strategy where developers code are continually, all right, are continually or frequently or automatically being deployed into production, right? So far so good. We've been able to implement a concept called continuous deployment. Continuous deployment with Jenkins and Kubernetes. My lovely viewers, I thank you for your support. I thank you for your support. I thank you for everything. All right. So please watch this video, learn, practice, go over it. If there's a concept you don't understand, go over it one, two, three, four times, and you should be all right. So thank you immensely. Thank you for everything. Please kindly share, subscribe to our channel, share our channel with your friends. Share. I want to share these things, share love. I'm sharing the same way I'm sharing love. I want you guys to share this love, man. This is love called love. I'm sharing love, guys. So please share to your even to your household. Share this video. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and see you in our next episode. Thank you.